The Backdoor GAA Podcast for 2023 is now brought to you by Steede Motor Group. For your personalised vehicle shopping experience, visit steedemotorgroup.ie.
Delighted now to be joined by Adrian Varley on this week's podcast. Adrian victory for the New York senior footballers this year, and he's now returned to his club, Cortoon Shamrocks, for the club championship. He played many years for Galway. Adrian, just to touch off, I suppose we were talking off air there, you're back with the club now, Cortoon Shamrocks, for the club championship.
Yeah, back with the club again for another year. Obviously missed out last year. I was away in New York, so yeah, I wasn't around. But yeah, back this year and looking forward to it. I think we're probably struggling a bit this year with injuries, like I was saying to you. But you know, nobody knows. Championship is a different ball game. We had a disappointing league campaign. We were relegated, unfortunately. But you know, I think that if we can get everybody back from injury, you know, we'll be competitive, and we'll see where that takes us. But like I said to you, Brannock's in the first game, that would be a tough one. They have our number so far this year. They've beaten us twice by a point on both occasions. So yeah, look, sure, we'll see what happens, you know.
What does the club mean to you?
The club is everything, really. Sure, you know, I probably started playing with the club when I was 5 years old. Yeah, it's kind of started playing with my twin brother, my older brother Damien. My twin brother's name is Paul, so started playing from a very young age. Very small parish, tight community. Lot of pride within the club. Obviously, you know, Derek Savage, Tommy Joe Gilmer, Mickey Rooney. There was a lot of good players who played for Galway, but probably Savo was my role model. You know, won an All Ireland '98, 2001, and yeah, I think for anybody growing up that time, particularly within the club, you were looking up to him and you were thinking that, you know, maybe somebody I could play for Galway. So I think that he made that possible, you know, to dream big and to think that even from a very small club like Cortoon, that, you know, if you put your mind to it and you believe in yourself, you can go and compete at that level. So yeah, I think from a very young age, I definitely would have set that goal for myself. And you know, looking at Savo, the way he held himself and the confidence that he had, the standards that he set for himself, and particularly when we were training, when I was growing up watching him, but when I started to actually play with him and to see what a fierce competitor that he was, like, it was probably, I don't think I've ever played with anybody like him, to be honest. And that was something then that you tried to replicate or mirror, which was a hard thing to do, because I don't think you could ever match his competitiveness. But yeah, he was huge for me, massive role model.
Just with that, when you talk about Derek Savage being a role model and everything, does he almost inspire you when you consider the age he played at, and he's only kind of recently stopped playing for your intermediate team?
Yeah, like, I suppose when you look at someone who achieved what he achieved at inter-county level, you know, 2 All-Irelands, an All-Star, played, you know, international rules as well. But his club was everything. You know, for him, when he played with Cortoon, just the passion that he had, the pride for the jersey, you know, I don't think, you know, a lot of inter-county footballers mightn't have that, but he did. So that was an unbelievable example that he was setting for us, that, you know, it's unbelievable to play for your county. Like, it's a huge honour, but your club always comes first. You start with your club, you'll always end up back playing with your club when you finish up with your inter-county career. So I think that, yeah, like, it was just how much it meant to him. It always just kind of forced you to play and give everything you can to the club. And, you know, even when the season would end with Galway, which is always difficult to kind of reset and to go back with the club, he was always there when I came back to refocus you and to kind of remind you of how important the club is. So yeah, just an unbelievable influence on me. Probably the biggest influence that I had in my career, to be honest with you. And as I got older and as I got more confident and more comfortable with myself and even being around him, the conversations we would have, were brilliant, and we used to bounce, a lot of ideas off one another. And, we were very close when we played together. So it was huge. I learned so much from him, and probably home an awful lot, to be honest. But yeah, very, very grateful that I got to play football with him,
Is there any particular one thing that he told you that stood out?
I used to always have this phrase, have a cut. He loved that one. Just basically, no matter what, just give it your best. Nothing to lose. I always admired how he could perform so consistently. That was probably the biggest thing that I noticed with him, that regardless of the game or the pressure of the game, he could go out and just play the same way he plays every day. But then he trained that way. He trained and played the exact same way. If we were playing 5v5 down the pitch, he'd be fighting with you, and he'd be rolling around the ground, trying to get the better of you. He'd almost remind you of Michael Jordan in his competitive nature. Like, I'm not even exaggerating that. Ask anybody from Cortoon who's played with him. He had that edge, and he definitely, look, at some people found that maybe difficult at times and uncomfortable, but he just had huge standards, huge expectations, and he got the best out of people.
With that as well, you obviously had your twin brother Paul playing all the way up with you, and going on to play Galway and 21 Galway senior as well with you. Was that extra special?
Yeah, it was. I suppose I didn't really think about it at the time, to be honest with you. But yeah, looking back, we were lucky enough that we played, obviously, underage together, all the way up along, and then we got to minor. Jerry Fahy was, I think, our manager the first year, playing minor, and that was special. We got to play in Croke Park together for the first time that year. Lost out to Cork in a semi-final, and obviously played in a home cup final with them as well. Under 21 All-Ireland final, himself and Colin Ryan. Colin Ryan's from my club as well. So, to win an All-Ireland with my twin brother and Colin Ryan, who we went to primary school together, grew up together from the age of 4. That was very special. And yeah, and then went on to play senior into county football with Paul as well for a couple of years. So yeah, like, looking back, it's a unique enough thing to happen. I know the Sweeneys did it as well, Patrick and Cahill, and you spend all your time with them. You literally spend every single day you're training with them, you're living with them at the time. So probably couldn't wait to see the back of me for a while. It's just, you do spend so much time together. But it's something you'll always look back on and be grateful for.
Would you say you're yourselves inside out when you're playing with each other now?
Yeah, I would. Yeah. We have a very special kind of an understanding on the field. Very different types of players. Like, he plays out the field, I play inside. But he would know the runs that I would make, the ball that I would be looking for. He almost is anticipating the move that I'm going to make and what kind of ball I want in, maybe over the top or whatever. He just he can read it. And yeah, we have a good understanding, and we have high expectations of one another. There's times on the field where you might get a little bit annoyed with one another as well, if particularly the full forward's always the cranky one anyway, looking for the perfect ball all the time. So there's plenty of times I've let him know and he's let me know. But yeah, very good understanding. And you have that when you grow up together, and you're obviously, we're twin brothers, you play together your whole lives, you're going to have a special connection. And I had that with Colin, have it with Colin Ryan as well, because we've played together since we were 5 years old, and he's always kind of played 11, and I've been 14. So he can deliver a ball, straight into the chest, left and right. But again, the understanding is there. He knows the types of runs, and I know what he's looking to do. So that's huge when you're playing football.
You mentioned Colin Ryan there, who played all the way along with you up. Paul's played all the way along with you up. There's as you said, there seems to be a real bond. But is there with that with Cortoon kind of a real tight-knit community when you talk earlier on there about it being a small club?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think every small club is probably the same, to be honest. You have to have a bit of a chip on your shoulder, particularly when you're playing against the bigger teams. And obviously we're a neighbouring parish to Tuam, so your whole life trying to get the better of Tuam, and obviously they're a much bigger club, hold the record for the highest number of county titles. So you have to have that edge. You have to bring the parish pride, that small club mentality, and we're all in this kind of together. It's like a kind of going to war, and I think when I started off playing, that was so evident. It was a huge part of our probably strategy, the way we played, and teams found it very difficult to play against us and hated playing against us because we were very physical and would never give up. Probably lost a bit of that then throughout the years. I think we lost a lot of our probably more experienced guys, more physical players. So we maybe struggled a little bit with that, and maybe, what it means to play for the club. But I think, getting that back again, and that's just about, I think every day you go out and you play, you just have to keep reminding yourself of why you do it. You're doing it for your club, and you're doing it for the younger guys that are watching you. You're trying to set an example. So yeah, I think we have huge pride, and always will.
Just when I was kind of doing a bit of research for this, Adrian, I was looking back around the intermediate final when you had that COVID controversy ahead of the final. Is that one of the most frustrating times in your career?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. You couldn't. You probably couldn't have a conversation with me around that time, because it was just one of those, it was a very unique kind of a situation to be in. So obviously never happened before, but like I'm a teacher, so a child tested positive, and because I was a close contact, I couldn't play, even though I didn't have COVID because I tested negative, but they were just the rules at the time, and I couldn't play, and we tried to change the game and push it back, but the county board and Dumore at the time decided not to. So yeah, it was extremely frustrating. I remember sitting at home in the house, streaming the game, watching it, perfectly fit and ready to play, but couldn't. So that was one of the toughest. It was probably, yeah, definitely, when I talk about the club, and one of the toughest days I've had, that was probably it. Because you can't do anything, but the lads were exceptional that day. They were one of the best games they've ever played. And again, there was probably we had a real chip on our shoulder that day, and we probably had a point to prove, and the lads were just unbelievable.
Does that intermediate final then against Kilkerran, does that stand out as one of your moments?
Yeah, it would have to, because I think it was the first piece of silverware that I would have, big, significant piece of silverware that I would have won with the club. And like, I was joint captain with David Finnegan. We had everybody that year. Savo was the player manager. Wardy was still there, and he still is flying it. Brian Roach, like, you had a lot of these guys who have given so much time to the club. Like, most of these guys are in their 40s. And you had a good, mix of the young and the old. But yeah, I think it was probably getting over the semi-final against the odds, and then to go out and beat Clonberne. It was massive. It was a huge day, hugely huge pride in it for all of us. And I think when it's a neighbouring parish, when there's such rivalry there as well, it probably makes it that bit sweeter. But look, there was nothing in it. I think we won by two points maybe in the end, but it could have went either way.
Do you have regrets then when you get up to senior? Obviously, you come back down, but there is that challenge, obviously, when you come up from intermediate. It's happened to Branners too, obviously. It's just about not being this yo-yo team. Obviously, the aim is to survive, but it is a competitive landscape up there when you take that jump from intermediate.
Yeah, and I think the year that we won it, we weren't ready to go up senior. We needed probably a few younger lads to come through, and we didn't have that. So yeah, I think you don't want to win intermediate, go up and come down again. That's the last thing you want, because that's not good for anybody, especially for confidence for younger guys. And that year we really struggled. The year we went up, we were well beaten by Killannon in the first game. St. James's beat us well in the second game, and then the third game we actually pushed Shooting Stars quite close, which was maybe unexpected. But then we went into the relegation, and then every game is a dogfight, and every game you lose, it just gets harder, because it sucks the life out of you, and the confidence starts to drop. So I think we were beaten by Cardiff and Spiddle, and all games we could have won, and it could have went either way. But ultimately we played Barn, and they relegated us for the second time, in a game that, again, it was in Annadown. They actually relegated us twice in Annadown, so we hate playing in Annadown at this stage. But they were, like, Barn are better at the time, a better senior team, and more equipped to stay senior. For us, I think we just needed, we'll see what happens this year, but probably need a couple of years of just playing intermediate football and bring a couple of young lads through, and confidence, getting the confidence back again.
What's the hope this year now, as the intermediate club championship is approaching, about 2 weeks out now?
Well, I suppose we won't, we're not going to look too far ahead, to be quite honest with you. We'll look to Brannocks. We really will just take one game at a time, and if we could get a win, like, a win changes everything. It changes confidence, momentum. So yeah, we'll be just targeting the first game, to be honest with you. I know that 3 teams go through this year, 3 out of the 4. So obviously, if you can win one game, that puts you in a good position. But we won't be looking at that, really, to be honest. We just want to do the best we can and take one game at a time. And if we can put in a good performance against Meow Brannocks, obviously it would be great to win that game. But even a good performance to build on for the next game. And just see where it takes us. Not put too much pressure on the outcome, and winning intermediate. I don't think that helps anybody. So it's competitive. It's very competitive down there. It's a dogfight. There's a lot of teams kind of on par. So it's very hard to know how it will go. Kilconnelly had a good year last year. You have Monavea there this year, and Carrow. Like, I know Monavea, like, they'll be obviously in Carrow. They'll be hard bets. So take it one game at a time and see what happens.
This year, it's probably been a unique year for you playing football, but have you ever experienced anything like that New York win out in Gaelic Park against Leitrim on penalties?
No, I haven't. No, it was. Look, it was very, very special. Hugely unique. Something, obviously, growing up, that I'd ever thought would happen. Like, that you'd even find yourself in that situation where you'd be playing for New York. So it was unbelievable. It was like winning an All-Ireland, to be honest with you. Like, that euphoria at the final whistle, when the last penalty went in, when Mikey Brosnan buried that last penalty, under lights, Saturday night in the Bronx. It was incredible. Like, it'll go down as one of the highlights, definitely, of my career. And it was just, when you looked around and you saw what it meant to people. Obviously, the people who live there, the Irish American players. My brother's been living there for 10 years. Saw what it meant to him, how emotional he was after the game. Himself and his wife Sarah. So, like, I have a lot of friends over there, and when you're over there and you're playing, you realize, like, just the impact that the GAA has on the Irish abroad, and the connection that it has to home and to your identity. And it's invaluable, really, and it's played a huge part, I know, in my brother's life in New York, and so many more. So it was just, it's hard to put into words, because that first, as Johnny Glenn said, like, that first 15 seconds, that's the time where it can't be touched. the magic of it, And it was that first 15 or 20 seconds, that feeling, it was just incredible.
From those 15 seconds there, and you talk about it and how special it was, but when you think about it now, to be part of the first New York football team to ever win a game in the Connacht Senior Football Championship.
Yeah, I suppose in 2015 I went over and played against New York with Galway, and at the time, sure, it was a bit of a Mickey Mouse fixture, to be honest with you. Nobody took it that serious, even though nobody wanted to go over and be the first team to lose to New York. There was a little bit of fear there, because it nearly happened a few times, and that wasn't by design. It was nearly more so by chance. Maybe the opposition coming over not prepared or not taking New York seriously, but it nearly happened a few times. But this year was different because it was completely by design. And the belief was there from the very get-go. We were building on last year, nearly beating Sligo last year. And I think we had 13, 14 of the starting 15 from last year's team, which is kind of unheard of because there's a huge turnover of players in New York. So this year we were building on something from the previous year. And we knew, because we pushed Sligo so close last year, that it was extremely possible to win this year. So I just think that the belief was there. It was Johnny Glenn, to be honest, was the one who was driving it all. And obviously Johnny McGeaney and the rest of the management. But I think Johnny Glenn really instilled that belief that there was something special there, and that we could all be part of it. And again, it's funny how life throws you in that direction, like how I ended up playing with New York last year and again this year. Sometimes you can't really understand how it happens, but the stars align in some way, and you end up there, and it's unbelievable. Very, felt very privileged to be part of it.
Johnny Glenn's influence, you could almost tell that Leitrim game. He was injured a few times, but he was just adamant to stay playing on when that game was in extra time. But what does he bring to the table as a player?
Well, I think Johnny, number one, his physicality, sure, he's as strong as a horse, and he just plays. He plays with his heart in his sleeve, gives absolutely everything to the cause. He empties himself every day he plays, and like I tell you, the Galway hurlers would tell you the same thing. When Johnny Glenn is playing, it's his honesty, it's his leadership, and it's his absolute willingness to win. Nearly at all costs, just whatever it takes. And his presence alone just inspires players. It inspires them to get more out of themselves and to really push themselves to their limits. He's a very, very unique individual, a unique player. And I think any team that he's involved with seems to experience success, So I think it's his presence as much as his technical, we'll say, attributes, that I think that's his greatest strength. And teams don't like to see him coming, particularly if you're playing midfield and you're marking Johnny Glenn. You know what you're going to get for 70 minutes. It's going to be relentless, there's going to be absolutely nothing enjoyable about it. Like even in football, for what maybe he lacks in technical ability, he can make up for it through his athleticism and his physicality, and again, just never say die attitude.
Did that come as a surprise to you when obviously you probably knew Johnny Glenn as a hurler rather than a footballer when you initially went over?
Yeah, but I'd heard enough about Johnny to know that that's the way it was going to be. I suppose I met Johnny in 2017. I went over playing with Monaghan for the summer, Monaghan, New York, and it was actually him who put me into contact with Monaghan. So I knew a bit about him that time, and obviously through the hurling, but it wasn't until last year when I went over and played with New York that I really got to see that side of him. And we just clicked straight away, the two of us, and became really, really good friends and very close, and would have kind of bounced off one another during our time together. And he just, it's kind of hard to describe it. It's his energy, it's ability to read people, his emotional intelligence, and knows what's right and what's wrong, and when something needs to be said and when something doesn't need to be said. But he's just very, very good at putting the arm around somebody's shoulder. He's very good at giving, team talks and the collective talks as well. But he's just really good one-to-one. And I think that's so important within a team environment, that it can't always be collective. It has to be individual as well. And if you know your players, you know what approach to take. And, if someone comes to training, they're usually in good form. But for whatever reason, they're not. Johnny will pick up on that straight away, and the next thing he's meeting them for a coffee. So that's a special thing to be able to do. So yeah, he's one of a kind, Johnny.
Just with that, with New York as well, you obviously don't participate in the league. How tough during that period, like when you go back training to the Connacht Championship, is it when you just can't get challenge matches just with the way things are?
Yeah, it's a massive challenge. It's absolutely, something that obviously was alien to me, but, you're over there, you start training in January, and there's snow, could be -5, -10.
Are you
the
out training in
facilities.
that then?
Sorry?
Are you out training in that?
Yeah, you would be out training in those conditions, and you're wrapped up, you have 3 or 4 layers on you. It's pure misery. Like, you're training in Gaelic Park, and there are no showers because Manhattan College won't turn on the showers. So you have to train and go home, and some guys have to go back they're going to Queens or Brooklyn or Long Island. So it's a huge commitment, and people go to New York not to play football. It's to work, it's for their careers usually. So it's a massive commitment. People are going straight from work to Gaelic Park, getting home at 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I know there's huge commitment here at home as well. It's not like that doesn't happen here, but I just think that it's more difficult in New York, that there are more obstacles, and you don't have the same resources, the same facilities as you do at home. And you have a bunch of random guys coming together from different counties all over Ireland, and then you have maybe 10 or 12 Irish American guys thrown in there as well. So it's like, I suppose, the closest thing, the best comparison I can make is it's kind of like playing Sigerson football or college football. You've never met these guys before, but you kind of come together, and there's a massive bond created, and it's so enjoyable. It's very, very enjoyable. And you have so many different personalities and characters, and Adam Stones, he was a guy on the panel, and there's guys like him, brilliant individuals, and just, yeah, it's definitely more difficult for New York, and the lack of games. Like if New York were to play 6 or 7 league games, you'd know where you're at, and you'd know what your starting 15 is. But when you're over in New York, you're playing AVB games every week, maybe 2 AVB games, trying to figure out what your best 15 is, trying to figure out how you're going to set up, but not really knowing how good you are, because if the A team is playing the B team, you're kind of wondering, well, how good is the B team? You're not comparing them. You're not comparing the opposition to, an inter-county team. So it's very hard to know where you're at, very hard to gauge it. But I think this year we had a better understanding of where we were at, because we played Sligo last year. We pushed them close. It was nearly the same 15 again. So you kind of have an idea. And then I think this year was just the belief. The big thing for New York is, in the past, did they ever really believe they were going to win? Probably not. Where this year there was kind of an unwavering belief there from the very get-go. And yeah, I don't think we were ever going to lose that game to Leitrim, to be quite honest with you.
Was that said from the outset, from the very first day you met, about Leitrim, that there's a real possibility here that you can win this?
Yeah, it wasn't even that it was a real possibility. It was almost like we are going to beat Leitrim. It was that strong, to be quite honest with you. And that comes from a lot of things. It comes from maybe leaders within the group. But this year was just a panel of players we had. It was probably the consistency, the continuity that was there from last year, something New York wouldn't have had before. We didn't have to start from scratch again. It was just building on last year, so that was huge. And I think that, yeah, like everybody felt it. The energy within the group was unbelievable. And like, we had injuries going into the game. Like, I was injured like 4 or 5 weeks coming into the game, and was picking up a lot of niggles. And the week out from the game, I didn't even know if I was going to be playing, to be honest. Johnny Glenn was the same. The two of us we probably shouldn't have been playing, to be honest with you, but there was just this kind of like, win at all costs. It'll happen. And yeah, it was class. It was just unbelievable, to be honest with you. And it's unreal what belief can do, you know.
What's the occasion like in itself, as you mentioned at the start there when we were talking about New York, Saturday night in the Bronx, but like that occasion of playing in a Connacht Championship, do you think it can nearly be confusing for players? Because even when you're watching it on the TV and you're looking at Gaelic Park, the pitch, there's obviously a lot of sports play, there's a lot of different lines and stuff. You might get confused sometimes, because obviously there's different sports played there too.
Yeah, it's a hard place to go. Yeah, definitely. Like for Leitrim, or for any team that comes over there, like, they have to adjust to that very quickly. And they have they have jet lag. They're coming over. There's a lot of distraction. People think it's a holiday, but the players have to stay focused. And I really think, like, Leitrim coming over this year, I'm sure they would have been worried. They knew the team that was there. They knew that we were going to cause them problems. So they would have been worried. They would have been thinking about the jet lag. The game was on. It was a late game, so for them, it would have been very hard for them to adjust to that. So yeah, and then the pitch, like playing on that Astro, people don't realize how difficult it is to play on the Astro there. It's so fast, and as you said, the lines can be very distracting. We're so used to it, we don't take any notice of it, but for teams coming over there, it definitely is another challenge, But then for New York, like when we went home and played against Sligo, then 2 weeks later, we had to play on grass, and our lads found that very, very difficult to adapt to, because it was a wet day. The ball doesn't bounce the same way. It's not as easy on the eye, it's more kind of, it's easier to get the hand in, it's easier to get dispossessed and turned over. So I think that it's definitely hard for the team that goes to the Bronx, because they don't train on an Astro,
What were the few days like as a group around New York, getting out to celebrate after that historic moment?
Oh, it was brilliant. Yeah, it was a big party in the Bronx. Took a few days to recover from it for sure, but it was brilliant. Like, my family were my whole family were there. My twin brother, obviously my older brother who lives there, my mum and dad, they were out as well. And Owen Kern was out from Galway. It was special actually playing with Owen Kern, because I would have played with him with Galway, and obviously Johnny Glenn. I had a lot of friends over there, and everyone was just in brilliant form, and everyone was just out celebrating. So that night was brilliant. It was very, very enjoyable. And then obviously the next day as well, we headed into the city, just the team, on the Monday, or the Sunday, I should say. And we had right crack in there. Yeah, it was class.
Then when you just see, like, obviously you lost to Sligo, you played Carlow then in the Tailteann Cup, but even you got the sense talking to a few of the New York players that were mentioned, obviously Sligo was a big adjustment, but the performance against Carlow then was obviously something as a group I'd say you were happy with, because they did definitely give Carlow a real rattle that day in the Tailteann Cup.
Yeah, I suppose there was a lot of, like, we were very disappointed with the Sligo game, to be honest, because it wasn't a case that we were just going over there to play the game and see what happens. We'd beaten Leitrim. We really did feel going home that we had a very good chance of beating Sligo, but it was a massive, the come down from beating Leitrim and having to kind of pick ourselves back up, refocus. Obviously the few days of being out and celebrating, and then you have the travel and going home all of a sudden it's us that's going home traveling. We have to deal with the jet lag and the distractions, and then playing on a different surface. Sounds like I'm making up a lot of excuses here, but it was hard for us to get back to where we were. Even though we felt that we had, but we clearly hadn't. And Sligo, in fairness to Sligo, we probably didn't think they were as good as what they were. And they showed that this year. Like, they've made a lot of progress. They drew with Kildare, I think, didn't they, in that group game? They competed well at times against Galway as well. So they were a much better side than they were last year. And they weren't going to let New York fly home and beat them in Markievicz Park that day. So we felt that we wanted, I suppose, that the pride was the big thing, coming home playing against Carlow. It was just to get a performance, pride again in the jersey, and not just come home and kind of make a fool of ourselves, really. Now, obviously, I couldn't play. I transferred back to Cortoon, so I wasn't eligible to play the Tailteann Cup. Owen Kern wasn't available, Mick Cunningham, the goalkeeper. So we were down a few guys, but the lads, they gave it everything, played really well in the first half, but probably ran out of steam then in the second half, I would say, because the training and everything does drop after the championship. You've 6 weeks to prepare for the Tailteann Cup, but human nature, lads begin to maybe slack a bit, hard to stay motivated. So the training wouldn't have been as good going into that Tailteann Cup game as it would going into the Leitrim or Sligo game. But I thought the lads did really well and could hold their heads high afterwards. And it was if we were to beat Carlow, you're kind of like, what would have happened next? You would have been out again 6 days later. It's very difficult for New York because it's not, it's not practical, because you have to go home to New York and then fly back out again. So it is quite difficult, but I think the lads did well that day, and it was a nice way to finish the year.
Have you closed your career, the door on your career with New York now, or do you still hope to get back there?
No, that's me finished with New York. I've retired from playing with New York. I suppose it was only ever supposed to be a 1-year thing. I was living over there last year for a couple of months, and it just, so happened that I was available to play again this year. So no, I achieved everything that I could have hoped to achieve with New York and more. So it was brilliant, an unbelievable 2 years, and couldn't have asked for more. Brilliant bunch of guys, management, everybody, and friends for life, memories for life. So that's me finished with New York and the New York dream.
Just with that, I have to ask a question then. Is there a hope for yourself to get back into the Galway squad?
I don't know. Last year, I suppose I would have been open to going back in. At the beginning of the year, I would have, I honestly would have been, but it just didn't happen. And because I was able to play with New York, I decided to do that. And if I had got the call to go in with Galway, I would have missed out on that with New York. So it's funny how things work out. As Father Pat Donald used to say, good luck, bad luck, who knows? So yeah, things happen for a reason, but I'm that bit older now. I've been out of the Galway setup for 2 years. So yeah, I don't think it will happen, to be quite honest with you, but sure, who knows,
And just with that, how do you look back on your time with Galway from 2013 to 2020?
Yeah. So I joined the panel in 2013 after we won the under-21 All-Ireland. So yeah, I think it was just a couple of weeks after we won it, and Alan Mulholland was the manager at the time, and he asked me in for, I think it was an in-house game, just to make up the numbers. But I think I gave Finian Hanley a bit of a roast in that day in a game. I think I chipped the keeper as well. So yeah, I think I got a call in after that training session to join the panel, and sure, of course, I jumped at it. 20 years old, it's what I've been playing for and what I've been dreaming of. So I went straight in, and Galway were really struggling that time. That was the year that I think Mayo beat them by maybe 17 points in Pearse Stadium, and We were struggling against really poor teams. It was a very difficult time, but that didn't faze me. I just wanted to play. I think myself and Shane Walsh were the only two from the under 21 panel that went in that year. So then I played 13, 14, 15, 16. Then I took the year out and I went to New York and played. And then I went back in 18, 19, 20. But looking back, I suppose it was the word that probably comes to mind is frustration, to be honest with you, Paul. But a lot of that's to do with injuries, probably finding it hard to get that consistency, you know, to train and maybe perform consistently. And that would have then affected the game time that I would probably have gotten. And, you know, like this, the stat is, like, I don't know, people are probably not aware of the statistic, but I only had 2 championship starts in 7 seasons with Galway. So that's a pretty poor return for the, you know, the time and effort that you put into it. So it would have been very frustrating for me, because I obviously would have went in at 20 years old thinking that things were going to be very different, and that I would have established myself on the starting 15 and would have played a big part, and ultimately winning All Ireland and play every game. Like that was the goal, that was the dream. So it was very frustrating, because I would have spent most of my career as a sub. And somebody has to be a sub, you know, that's just the way it goes. But I suppose for me, I found that very difficult to accept, found it hard to maybe understand at times. And, you know, there was times where I wasn't selected and I felt that I should have been, and that kind of thing. And look, I'm very, very driven, you know, very ambitious. So I never accepted it and was always quite angry about it. Sorry, now I just need to turn on the charger on this laptop, or it's gonna go. Sorry, Paul. Next thing I would have been gone. So yeah, it was very frustrating, very frustrating. Now, lots of highs, lots of lows, some great times, and look at friends for, like I said, with New York, like friends for life, things you'll never forget, and the connections that you make. You know, I would have really enjoyed the training and that competitive nature and the environment that I was in, but it probably was it was probably a time where I was more just more angry and frustrated than anything else, because I just didn't get out of it what I wanted to get out of it, and felt that there was very little I could do about it, you know, like I said, through the injuries, and then at times feeling that I was overlooked. So it was hard.
That's really interesting. And as you said, you played a lot of your career as a sub, but it was probably that super sub role, and it's a role I don't think anyone wants to play when they commit to inter-county football. But like, were you able to have conversations with management at that time about how you were being frustrated of constantly playing this role?
Yeah, like I think it was something that it would eventually boil over, you know, that I'd have to have the conversation, but probably didn't happen in the way that it should have happened. Like, I think if the lines of communication are open, and, you know, that you feel comfortable approaching management about these things, it doesn't need to get to that point where you get frustrated. But often you're kind of left thinking and wondering yourself, and that's always a dangerous thing for a young person to do, because your mind takes over. You know, you create a narrative in your head that's maybe it's not there, but you don't know any better, and you don't know why you're not playing. So you get very frustrated, and eventually then you might have to have that conversation. But like I said, it's not in a healthy way. And I don't know how much you really get from it. But I think that like I said earlier, every player needs to be told where they're at, you know, if they're not playing, why they're not playing. And if you don't feel like you're valued or respected the same way as the guy to your left or right, that obviously is going to cause frustration. Now, that might not be intentional, but it happens, you know. And I think that everybody, just when you're putting in that much time and effort, you need to know that you're doing it for a reason. And like I said, if you're respected and you're valued, even if you're not playing, I think you can accept it. But at times when you're left in the dark, it's you feel a little bit hard done by. But that's the nature of it. It is cutthroat. Intercounty football can be very cutthroat and a little bit ruthless. And sometimes, for certain players, particularly the players on the fringes, it's a lonely place to be. It can be a very lonely place to be. And I know lots of guys who would have struggled with the same thing.
Would you ever had conversations with yourself or thought during that time of stepping away?
Oh yeah, I'd say at the end of every season. It was a constant battle, to be honest, to stay in there and to persevere. And I suppose the reason that I kept persevering was you thought that next year will be the year. Next year will be the year that I make the breakthrough. That I might, have a season where I'm injury free, where the manager will back me and I'll get on that starting 15 every day that we're playing. But it just never happened. And I suppose for me the big thing was, at a very young age, I created that belief that to be successful and to be good enough, I had to win an All-Ireland with Galway. That was a very strong belief that I had from a very young age. That unless I do what Derek Savage did, or that 98-2001 team, then I'm gonna you're gonna be a failure. And when that wasn't happening, when I wasn't playing then, and when we obviously ultimately didn't win an All-Ireland with Galway, you're kind of coming away from it feeling like a failure and really questioning your self-worth, because you attach so much of your self-importance and your identity to playing with Galway and winning All-Ireland, that you do start then to question your own self-worth. Now I don't feel that way now, because I look at things differently now. I have a different perspective and I have a greater awareness around it. But at the time, I was so consumed by it that you're bringing a lot of that anger and frustration and disappointment into your everyday life then. And people might not pick up on it. It could be very invisible, but it's there and it's constant, that feeling. So yeah, it was a very challenging time. And it's not to say, you have to face challenges and you have to deal with disappointments and it makes you more resilient. It's not to say that you shouldn't experience that. But I think for me, it was always just the case of, if someone would only just speak to me and tell me why, then I'd be able to accept it maybe. But, a lot of the time that didn't happen. And again, that's not an intentional thing. It might be a lack of awareness or understanding around the significance of it. Because at the end of the day, every player is a person. Every player that has a number on their back, they're a person first and a player second. And we all live through life, and everybody has challenges and difficulties. Nobody can avoid that. It's inevitable. And there's a lot of stresses, and you have to go to work. You have to play the game, and then if things aren't going well, on top of that, then it's hard to process. So yeah, I think that people need to understand that, and even I see it, Paul, with spectators and supporters. And I see it a lot more now because I'm up in the stand looking down at it. But people are so quick to judge and come out with very, kind of just critiquing players and harsh comments. And I think that, every player that's out there is doing the best that they can on any given day. And they have a lot going on too. And they're completely entitled to make mistakes. And nobody knows what's going on in anybody's lives. So I think that it's compassion and an understanding is hugely important.
There's some great points to touch on there. Just when you mentioned about how you mentioned in that point, your dream from a young age is always an All-Ireland with Galway. In 2022, then, how were you watching Galway in the All-Ireland final, thinking that maybe this could be the time that they get over the line and you wouldn't be part of it?
Yeah, I really struggled with it. It was one of the most difficult days I'd say I ever had, to be honest with you. it was almost impossible to watch. You know, it was I was actually in New York with Johnny Duane and Eamon Brannigan, and they were obviously in the same boat. You know, the three of us together, and that was very, very hard. You know, because your whole life, as you said, or as I was saying, that my dream is to win an All Ireland, to play with Galway, and then that day finally comes. They're in an All Ireland, but you're not there. You're over New York, watching it on TV. Like, it's such a surreal kind of feeling. And obviously, you have so many good friends involved, and you know, you wish them the best and you want to win, but there's a kind of a conflict there. So yeah, I wouldn't like to go through it again, but I think it was just so raw last year. It was very hard to watch, and yeah, look, if these things happen, that's life, and you get on with it. You know, it makes you stronger, but plenty of learnings involved, and an awful lot to take from my career. And going forward, even I think as a coach, if I was to go forward as a coach or a manager, you would bring a lot of that with you, and would definitely make you a more well-rounded, I'd say, coach or manager.
Just in your time with Galway, you obviously played with Damien, you played with Shane, you played with Ian Burke, you played with them since probably St. Jarlath's football. Was that special in one sense, going with them players all the way up from, say, Jarlath's, minor with some players, 21s obviously you're all together, and then senior?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely. Like, I think there was a kind of there was a confidence within that group. There was a mentality that we would be the group that would win an All Ireland with Galway, if that makes sense. We just kind of came in. We played a lot of that group played in a home cup final that we lost out by a point. But to win the under-21 All Ireland, then there was that kind of feeling like, yeah, like if we can bring enough of these guys through, stick at it for a number of years, get better, get more experience, that this will be the group that will win an All Ireland. And a lot of that group is like Ian Burke was there this year again, Damo and Shane and like Liam Silk. There's a lot of lads that aren't there, but yeah, I think we would always have had conversations at a very young age with just, again, like just the belief that we're going to win an All Ireland. And if anyone was to tell us otherwise, we wouldn't believe it. So yeah, it was to answer your question, it was special. It was very special to play with those lads all the way along, because again, you know one another and you have that understanding on the field. That's what it's all about. There's a connection. You don't even have to say anything. Like, you just look at a guy and they know what you want to do. And myself and Ian Burke and Shane Walsh would have had that. You know, I think myself and Ian in particular, we really understood one another's game, and yeah, it was kind of effortless. You know, when you're on the field with those guys, it's effortless and you don't have to think about it.
And you mentioned there about supporters in the stand. Obviously, there's a lot of expectation this year of Galway. They were beaten a lot sooner than teams thought they were going to beat in that preliminary quarterfinal against Mayo. But like, a lot of those players you mentioned there are your friends. And is it difficult when you're hearing that kind of stuff in the stand, like, maybe not to react it sometimes, because ultimately these lads are your friends, and there probably has been a lot of criticism, but that's just the way social media and people probably are at matches these days. Like,
yeah, of course, it's difficult. Difficult to bite your tongue, I suppose, at times, because, like, I suppose a lot of the things that can be said can be quite hurtful. You know, it's almost like a personal attack. Like, it's not always like that. Sometimes it's just general given out. But I think if it's personal, then yeah, it can be very difficult, because, and again, I think it's in the moment. It's in the heat of the moment. You know, it's not like, it's kind of, it's sport. It happens all the time. But I think it's just the people, the people that are saying it or whatever, they're not really thinking about the fact that those guys are brothers, they're sons, and they're doing the best that they can. They're committing their whole life to playing with Galway, like, and yeah, there's huge expectations, and that's part of it. Like, you know, when you're as good as Damo or Shane or Ian or whoever, there's huge expectation, and you know, if you're not doing that day in, day out, people are going to criticize you. That's just the way it goes. Like David Clifford, he's the same. If he has an off day, the whole country are talking about it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, almost like breaking news. If like, I can't even imagine David Clifford having an off day, but you know, the day will come when he will. But again, like, nobody is God. Like, you know, everybody is capable of having an off day, and some seasons, you know, you have more off days than you do good days, and vice versa. It just depends. Some years you have form, some years you don't, and there's always a reason for that. But I think at the end of the year, you have to reflect on, well, why did I not play as good this year as I did previous years? Why could I not get that confidence, that flow that I usually have? And that's up to the individual to find out, and maybe it's up to the management as well to ask the questions and to get to the bottom of it, because it's something that, like, I know, like, with, you know, Shane, I suppose this year he probably himself would be a little bit disappointed with how the year went from. But again, he's a human being, like, you know, but he has this exceptional gift and talent. So people are going to expect that from him day in, day out. And he'll reflect on the year, and he'll ask himself the hard questions. And, you know, next year's a new year. And I think Galway, like, talking about Galway getting knocked out this year, and I think they were having a very similar year to last year. Things were going very well. They obviously lost Liam Silk and Ciara Malloy through travel and injury. But they, you know, they had Cian Hernan. They blooded a couple of new guys, Cian Hernan, Jonathan McGrath, exceptional this year, John Maher. And they had probably more strength and depth this year. Berkey back, Cookie. And they just looked very solid. You know, they were set up very well, very organised, fit, strong, extremely hard to break down and to play against. And I think that they got really comfortable with being in those last 10 or 15 minutes when maybe the opposition had all the momentum, or maybe the opposition went ahead. They were able to deal with that. And that's a kind of a mental toughness and strength that haven't been there in the previous years. So I just think it was the Armagh game. The injuries, you know, obviously not getting over the line against Armagh, you know, it was just extremely costly, because they lost out on that 2-week break, probably a game against, you know, a team outside of the top three, and all of a sudden they could be in an All-Ireland semi-final or an All-Ireland final. So I think sport is very fickle. The margins are extremely fine, and I think that Galway are very, very close. I don't think they're any different to what they were last year, but they probably didn't have the same rub of the green or look that they had. And again, when you have guys like Damo and Sean Kelly who pick up injuries, Dylan McHugh, who people don't talk about but is hugely instrumental in what Galway do, Rob Finnerty, you know, he had knock all year. He couldn't get back to that level of fitness that he had. And you take away Liam Silk and Ciara Malloy, like, that's a lot of guys, a lot of really important players. So I just think that next year, with all those guys back, Galway thereabouts again. They're in the top three, and they're definitely going to go for it.
And you expect them to react next year?
Yeah, oh, definitely, yeah, 100%, yeah. Like, I think they're going to be very disappointed, because, like, in the space of a week, they're out of the championship, and it was completely unexpected. They would have been seeing themselves in straight through to the All-Ireland quarter-final. Again, it could have been against a team like, I don't know, I'm not disrespecting any team, but it wouldn't have been Dublin or Kerry. And you get over the quarter-final, you're in an All-Ireland semi-final, and anything can happen after that. So I think that they know that it was more of a slip-up against Armagh, and then, like, Sean Kelly playing with one leg against Mayo, and, you know, Damo playing one half, going really well, and then he comes off. But he's like the driving force. He's the focal point. And in the second half that day against Mayo knew that. They knew Damo was gone. They knew Sean Kelly wasn't at the level that he's usually at, and they just pushed on, and they had the wind. It was very disappointing end to the season, but I think they'll learn a lot from it, and they'll bounce back.
Just then, Adrian, a few quick fires and a few questions that come in for you. Finish. Who would you say has been the best player you've played with?
The best player that I have played with, like in terms of talent, you would have to say Shane. Like, definitely, like Shane is the most gifted player that I've ever played with. Unbelievable, like what he can do. I don't even need to talk about what he can do. Everybody has seen it, but on his day, like, you're kind of standing back looking at him thinking, how is he doing that? Like, just unbelievable. In terms of like consistency and maybe standards, you know, the leadership. Like, I always admired Gary O'Donnell like so much. You know, he was a massive role model within the group, a huge leader, and just the way he carried himself, he was exceptional, and he trained so hard, gave everything to the cause, along with lots of other guys like Bradshaw and Finian Hanley. You could name loads. Paul Conroy, Paul Conroy, brilliant player. Damo. There's just so many, but I think when I first went in with Galway, like, Gary O'Donnell was just one of these guys as well who just year in, year out consistently just brought the same commitment, same work ethic, same standards. So I always admired Gary a lot. You know, he was someone I actually tried to replicate in the way that I would train. And I know during COVID, myself did a lot of training together, and there was no taking a back seat. Like, we used to be doing running sessions together, just the two of us, and it was probably the fittest I ever was, because I was training with Gary O'Donnell, to be honest. He was unbelievable.
Then your toughest opponent?
Toughest opponent? Oh, Sheeny Mac. There's a few. No, I don't think I'll name one, but defend. So, like, Owen Kern, Dec Coyne, Dave Wynn, even my own club man there, Joan O'Neill. We just still have awful battles in training. That's to name a few. Yeah, but I can't really. Yeah, I wouldn't say one, but yeah, lots of aggressive defenders.
They'd be very clean encounters, I presume.
Say that again.
They'd be very clean encounters, I presume.
Oh my God, I think we ended up on the ground more than we did on our feet. Yeah.
And then the best manager you worked under?
Best manager I've worked under. I suppose what I say is the most enjoyable probably year that I had would have been the under-21 year. That was Alan Flynn, Dec Meehan, Paul Clancy. That was just extremely enjoyable, Very, very good setup, very well organised, and a good mix, a good dynamic between, like, Alan was obviously very organised, very meticulous, really, really good trainer, and then Clancy was a brilliant kind of a skills man. He was all about the skills and the forward play, and Decky then brought the passion and that kind of the aggression. So that was probably, I really enjoyed playing under that management.
Just had a question in from Rory O'Connor. He was just wondering, who's the strongest twin?
Who's the strongest twin? Look, I'm not going to answer that one, because if I say me, then people are going to, I can't answer it. I'd say Paul, even though right now it can't be Paul because he's lying at home on the couch after getting surgery. So right now it's me, but I'll give it to Paul.
That was great, Adrian, and thanks a million for coming on to the podcast.
No problem. Thanks a million, Paul.